Hi, so I'm here with Stu from SRAM. We're in their headquarters in Schweinfurt, Germany, and we're going to talk about brake tuning. Now, recently SRAM have simplified their brake offering, but there's still a lot of choice. Even if we've just got Motive, Maven, there's still a lot of rotor size choice. How does someone make the decision which brake to choose and which rotor size to choose? What's the best way?
Okay, so I think the easiest way to start thinking about your brake choices is being really clear about what your use case is.
Right.
I think the thing that maybe is not so clear to people is that brakes are actually a tunable part of your bike.
Right.
Just like suspension is tunable, brakes are also tunable. The way you do that with a brake is with the rotor size, with the pad compound. So if we were to look at the same brake, let's say we take a Motive brake, if we set that brake up with a 180mm rotor with an organic pad compound, that would be a very different power result to that same brake using a 200 or 220 rotor with the same pad compound even, or with a sintered pad compound. So every change you make will have a direct influence on the power that brake can produce. And even the rotor type. So we have 3 different types of rotors as well. So there's about 7% difference in power, let's say, between the rotor types, depending on which one you choose, all the way up to our HS2 rotor, which is the most powerful.
So what's the smallest rotor someone could choose?
So we use a 180 would be, for a mountain bike use, would be the smallest rotor size generally. So it's 3 sizes, 180, 200, 220. And then within that we have our centerline rotor, which is the one you can see here, centerline X, which is the one with the aluminium carrier, and then HS2 is our kind of more heavy duty, more powerful rotor. And the differences are obviously for the more weight conscious rider, the aluminium carrier is lighter than the steel. HS2 is heavier, but it's slightly thicker rotor, so it's a higher performing rotor in terms of the overall braking performance. So as I said at the start, it's really about matching your use case to the product that you choose. In terms of brake power, we would be looking at about 14% improvement in brake power, just going up one rotor size.
Right, and go from 180 to 200 gives you 14% extra.
And then another 14% more power if you jump to a 220. So there are some big differences, and what that means is that riders who are maybe more aggressive, heavier riders, particularly big guys riding e-bikes is a good example. They're going to need to go to the other end of the spectrum in terms of power versus, let's say, a smaller female rider on a smaller travel bike. So the reason why we offer all these choices is that these brakes can slot into the use case accordingly. And then again, the pad compound comes into that as well.
Yes, okay. So go for a bigger rotor if you want maximum stopping power, if you're a bigger person, if you've got a big, heavy e-bike. If you're lighter, smaller bike, you're conscious of weight, you can go down to a smaller rotor, but there will be less power there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that then maybe will help you to decide on where you're at in that choice, you can look at the colour of the rotor after you've done some of your sort of normal rides. So if we saw a rotor coming back still looking very silver and polished, you would say that rotor is probably not getting hot enough. So that to me would suggest maybe over braked. Someone had, let's say, more is not always better in the brake world. So I think there's a tendency sometimes for riders to maybe assume that if I just buy the biggest, most powerful brakes, that's going to be the best result. And okay, you might not need to use all of that power, but it's there if you do need it, kind of thing. That's not necessarily true, because rotors and pad compounds need to actually get hot to perform correctly. So if you wanted the optimal performance out of that brake, it actually does need to reach its heat window.
So if you're using it,
you could look at the colour of the rotor. As I said, if it came back and it was always nice and polished and silver, that's not actually a good sign. If you see some bronzing to the colour of the rotor where the braking surface is, that's normally a sign that it's got up to its temperature window and it's working well. If you see some kind of like rainbow colours forming on your rotor,
a bit of purple,
that's a bad sign. That means you've probably got it too hot. So that even just looking at your bike can give you some indications of whether you've made the right choice in terms of your brake.
So as well as that, we've got our 2 pad compounds. We've got the black organics there, and we've got the silver sintered. Which should people choose? Is one better than the other?
Again, it's a use case scenario. So sintered pads are there to be, let's say, more durable. Okay, so if you live in a place like I'm from the UK,
yeah.
So
a lot of mud,
a lot of
yeah. Rain.
So we are used to riding in those muddy, filthy conditions, and of course pads are going to take a beating in those conditions. So the sintered pad is really there to be more long-lasting in those horrid, gritty, filthy riding conditions.
Yeah.
The sintered pad will have a different initial feel in terms of the bite of the pad on the rotor than, let's say, the organic pad. So in terms of that initial grab, an organic pad material is going to give you the best result.
Right.
So if you're looking for that immediate, like straight away, that feeling of confidence and power from your brake, then an organic pad will do that. The sintered pad is going to be ever so slightly less, and maybe also takes a different amount of time to reach its temperature window. So there are some fundamental differences between the two. But I would say, in terms of the rider's choice, the easiest thing to do is just to decide: are you riding in filthy, wet, gritty conditions a lot?
Yeah.
Choose sintered.
Yeah.
One point to note on that, though, is the rotors and the pads should always go together. And again, I think that's something that people don't always know or understand.
Yeah.
So when we talk about bedding in a brake, which we'll get back onto that maybe in a second, but as we do that, what we're actually doing is we're transferring material from the pad to the rotor. And that's one of the key processes in how that brake performs. So what you should do, if you're riding sintered, is only use sintered pads on that rotor. So if you then were to switch to an organic pad, you would not get the same optimal brake feel from switching pads on that rotor. So it's almost kind of the best case scenario would be you have a set of rotors for organic pads, set of rotors for sintered pads.
Right, okay. So it might depend on time of year. For example, in the summertime, occasionally we get a nice summer in the UK. You might want to be using organic pads in the summer and then switching back to sintered in the winter. But at the same time as you switch your pads, then you should switch to the rotor, because we're bedding them in. And why is it important to bed the brakes in? Why can't we just use them straight away and expect them to work perfectly?
The bedding in procedure is really about, as I touched on a second ago, is transferring some of the material from the pad to the rotor. So when those surfaces are brand new, they're never going to come together and bite together in the best possible way for braking. So as we bed the brake in, and there's a process which we have a video actually on that on our YouTube channel. So there's a deep dive into brake bedding in procedure. But that is a really important process if you want optimal braking and your pads to last an optimal amount of time.
So when choosing a new brake, say for my trail bike, which I've got a set of lyrics on it, previously I would have run codes, but now codes are not in the lineup anymore. Which would be the best brake for me to choose?
Okay, so if you were a code user in the past, I think now, again, coming back to that use case example that we talked about, I think you'd be just deciding, on your trail bike, are you towards the lighter end of trail use? Are you a little bit weight focused? Do you want that bike to be as light as possible? In which case, you could come back towards the Motive brake with a larger rotor. That's going to be able to still deliver the power that you're used to from the code.
Yeah.
Or another way to look at it is you could go for the Maven brake, and actually, believe it or not, with the Maven, you'll be able to downsize in rotor because the power available from the Maven brake is significantly higher than where we achieve with code.
Yeah.
So actually, you find you could come down in rotor size. It means, therefore, you can take away the adapter brackets, a direct mount brake to the fork and frame, smaller rotor. Overall, the system weight is lighter for a even more powerful brake. So actually, I'd be probably erring you more towards the Maven brake, given the example that you just gave.
Right. Great. Thanks, Stu. That's given us a real good insight into brake system and which one we can choose for our bike. And if you'd like to see more videos on talking about brakes, talking about SRAM, see the link in description, and remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.